will be very, very exciting. Exactly. It's going to be exciting. Awesome. Well, welcome to the most anticipated AI agent panel. This is the one that every VC and founder want to be on. And congratulations, you 6 people win the game today. Maybe we start with a quick intro of each of the panelists. Henry, you want to start?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. My name is Henry. I'm a researcher, turned founder, turned AGI house concierge. So I was doing my computer science PhD at Berkeley back in 2015, and then dropped out, starting my first company. It's a B2B SaaS in code analysis space, and then grew the team to 50. And then early last year, I started running AGI house together with my co-founder, Rocky. And then AGI house really is 3 things. At the core, we are a community of AI founders and researchers. Our mission is to empower the people who aspire to build AGI to do their life's work through our community efforts. So we host a lot of AI events across research deep dives, also hackathon type events like builder days. And then also we have a VC early stage VC fund and pre-seed stage investing. And lastly, we are also incubating a company inside the ultimate operations of our community. So that's what we do.
Awesome. I'm Aditi. I'm a partner at Upfront Ventures. We are primarily an early stage investor. We do pre-seed and seed. Each partner spends their time on certain areas. I spend most of my time in B2B software. My background is mostly been in finance and operating. Spent some time at another venture firm, Crosslink Capital, and then some time at Google, and then came back into the investing side of things. And excited to talk about today's topic.
Eylul, Kayin, nice to meet you. I'm a partner at Gradient. We're a pre-seed seed fund focused on AI, started in 2017. Actually, you had Anna here earlier too, so I missed it. Maybe there's some chat about it there. We're affiliated with Google in that they're our sole LP, but we take advantage of the ecosystem resources without a strategic mandate. And we're a small team actually, but a relatively sizable portfolio of really interesting AI assets, ranging from infrastructure side, we're one of the largest investors in Lambda, to Crea's Riders of the World, and excited to chat about AI agents. I do think about that a lot.
Hi everyone, James DaCosta. I'm a partner at A16Z. We're a large multi-stage firm. I invest out of our AI applications fund and spend most of my time in financial services and vertical agents in niche industries. And then before that, I was a founder in the financial services space as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim, co-founder and CTO of Cresta. We're actually an A16 portfolio, and Cresta, basically we build AI agents for customer support and sales use cases. We spun off Stanford about 7 years ago. Before that, I was doing PhD research. I took a leave of absence to start the company, and also spent a year at OpenAI working on back in the days, sort of a precursor of the agent today, but more like reinforcement agents.
Hey everyone, I'm Tejas, co-founder and co-CEO of Hightouch. We build AI agents for marketing. So we work with companies like PetSmart or Warner Music Group or the NBA and allow them to do things like create an AI agent that has a goal, like get customers into the store more frequently, and then we figure out what's the best marketing to send each customer to make that happen. My background's more in engineering and product, and we've been working on the company for 5 years now.
Amazing. I want to kick off with a very fundamental question: is what is AI agent to you?
Well, that's a hard question. To me, AI agent is really a simple definition is LLM with memory and tools.
Yeah, I would say, I guess we're all building on the baseline of what the person before us says. Obviously, don't disagree with that. I would say the definition for us is, or for me at least, is a little bit more oriented to, I think a lot about in 2015, 16, 17, we had chatbots, and that was kind of like the rise of, it was like agents before we call them agents, we call them bots. And I always think of Operator. I don't know if people used Operator on Facebook Messenger to order your mom flowers and things like that. But those days are kind of long gone, and now they're back. because we now don't use operator in like the operator whatnot. I do think is interesting is we've changed the language, we've changed terminology of what we call a bot or like the functionality, but I do think in today's day and age, we're talking a lot more about these sort of, I would say, like these layers that are built on top of self-learning models and some of these LLMs, and these are adopted. I also think there are specific, when I think of agents, I think of workflows, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about broad agentic, like horizontal agents versus vertical agents. But I do think of workflows as being very critical to the format of an AI agent and the existence of it.
I'm gonna
Take it on.
take it add more to it. I'll refer everyone to an awesome paper that folks from Anthropic published earlier this year that kind of thinks through the definition of different architectures. That think we started off this ecosystem with LLMs, which are, models that are trained on public data. Then you layer on fine-tuning RAG, whatever. Some create to be able to create knowledge management tools. Then you layer on, what I call LLM workflows, which is chaining LLMs into each other in different ways, while still creating the human-coded logic that ties those things together. And then the latest iteration of autonomous agents. About autonomous agents, and I'm sure we'll find a way to talk about, program synthesis and all those type of companies that I think we're going to lead towards more AGI, but there's a lot of stuff to be done with just making RPA easier from a business utility perspective. There's a lot of ways of using LLM workflows without autonomous decision making to create really useful tools that have low time to value and immediate ROI to the enterprise that sometimes in the VC community, I think we shy away from because it doesn't feel the edgiest thing, but that's where a lot of the businesses that are seeing traction are doing under the hood.
Yeah, I think we think a lot about kind of agents in terms of kind of how they augment labor. So, we've had like co-pilots out there that help a human do work, and then agents essentially go and do that work that a human might have done. And so, in the last kind of software cycle, you had something like Salesforce, which is a digital filing cabinet for all your sales data, and an SDR would go into Salesforce and get that data, and now you can just have an agent go and do that work, get the data, reach out to the prospect, and maybe book a first meeting.
Right. I think agent is a marketing term. I think people mean agent, when they mention agent, they talk about different things. There's one type of agent which is like more like retrieval RAG. People think like that's agent. There's also workflow type of sort of you chaining LLM to achieve like certain enterprise workflows. But I think the agent, eventually what we're going to is the autonomous agent, which is like be able to have an AI that could take actions on your behalf and be able to like achieve a goal. We're not there yet, but we're making some progress in certain fields like coding and yeah.
I define agents as anything that you give an autonomous system a goal and it executes on it. I think those goals can just vary in scale, right? It can be a simple goal like test a bunch of content within these guardrails, or it can be a larger goal of like actually figure out what's the right marketing strategy for a group of customers.
Totally. I feel like AI agents is everywhere and in every industry, every vertical. Maybe we could start off with what is some interesting AI agent that's built in your space that you're excited about?
Ooh, I feel like a very short first time to first token time here.
Let's start over there. Let's go.
So I'll be biased here, talk about AI agent that we're building at Hightouch. So actually one thing that I didn't mention on my previous answer is I think it's pretty important that we don't tie the definition of AI agents just to a specific AI technology. A lot of people think of AI agents as like only LLM-based technologies, but I think Tim even mentioned he's working on some of the early AI agent stuff with like reinforcement learning and other traditional machine learning too. That's just like a better fit for a lot of tasks out there. One of those tasks that we have seen at Hightouch is figuring out like what's the best push notification or offer, like discount, marketing, et cetera, to send different customers. Platforms like Facebook and TikTok are already doing this in their news feeds or in their advertising algorithms using like reinforcement learning, right? So based on what's working for different customers, learning more and using those learnings to optimize how you engage other customers. At Hightouch, we've kind of found that in most traditional B2C industries like retail or media, a lot of marketers are just making decisions manually around which customers to send different emails to you or different offers to you, or what should be on their homepage of their website this month versus next month. And we believe that like AI agents, especially powered by reinforcement learning with a closed loop feedback loop towards like what's driving the goals that the business wants based on what products they want to sell, which are higher margin, can really help that use case. So we built a platform that it kind of makes that easier for marketing teams to put in action, where they can actually define their goals and connect it to their systems, controlling emails and their website and push notifications, and kind of use that at scale.
Yeah, I definitely agree that reinforcement learning is going to be a key ingredient for these agents to work. I remember like 7-8 years ago, in the beginning of OpenAI, there were like this talk about like building AGI, but if you remember that day, that time was mostly when we had AlphaGo and we have like AlphaZero, these reinforcement learning agents that could help solve very specific problems and can achieve superhuman performance on these like problems like Go. But back then, we don't have the foundation of the language model yet. So all the problem we can solve is like games, right, in simulated environments. Today, we have the basis for like language, and I think that enables like the agent to operate on a much higher level of representation abstraction, which means that we can solve many real-world applications. But reinforcement learning can be the key. It's like the cherry on top that really helps you to optimize for to get the agent working in that domain. And if you look at which domains have like the kind of like game kind of characteristic, which have like verifiable reward signals, I think that the problems that you were talking about, and also think like coding, where you can verify, you have a compiler and sort of linter that can verify the execution of the code. Or I think for customer support, you have like outcome signals, right? You can know if the case is resolved or not. So look for domains where you can have these reward signals, where you can actually apply reinforcement learning to get the agent to work really well.
Cool. Yeah, just to build on top, maybe a space that we're seeing a lot, kind of adjacent to the friends at Cresta, is voice agent. And so look for spaces where there are a lot of like human phone calls that go on today. And so we invest in this company called Happy Robot that helps to logistics for kind of freight brokers, and they are just seeing phenomenal traction, helping to organize calls that perhaps actually an AI is a better place to do than a human, because you're collecting the same information each time. You need to get that data back into a CRM afterwards, and often it's at kind of niche times, maybe sometimes in the night.
I interpret the question as sort of what are some of the hot agent categories, and obviously from a multi-stage venture perspective, we've seen that you can make money from, voice agents, custom support, healthcare, right? There's a bunch of those things that have obviously seen meaningful, like legal, we've seen commercial traction there. But I keep going back to the most interesting sort of world-changing aspect of agents, which is fundamentally if you can have software that writes software that researches how to write better software on its own, that then uses that information to write more software, that's pretty cool. I feel like that would be, and that's what I was kind of referencing earlier on. I think that's probably the way we get towards like meaningfully more sophisticated intelligence from a machine learning perspective. And if you can bet on the company that ends up delivering on that goal, that's probably going to be a big outcome. But I think there's a lot of things to be done from a workflow automation perspective on more niche B2B industries that from a pre-seed investor's perspective, it's more fundable and achievable from our capital strategy. But ideally, I would love to invest in stuff like that.
I would say, kind of on the vein of like interesting agent ideas, we spent a little time thinking about this, and there's a company building that's spinning out of a Stanford lab that's basically creating an entire science lab built by agents. And so they gave that lab a prompt, which was, there's a new strain of COVID, and we need to find a new vaccine. And that entire basically agentic lab was they had a PI agent, they had a bioinformaticist agent, they had just a variety of different agent characters. It almost felt a little Sims-like in some ways, but like everyone had a role to play, everyone was determined, or there were like goals of what to achieve, and they were able to come up with a new vaccine. And they kind of ran trials and they ran proof tests, and I thought that was like such an interesting, to the point on real world applications where we're seeing some of this, like, you know, thinking of positive impact on the world. Like, that is such an interesting use case. Don't get me wrong, generative storytelling is also incredibly interesting, and one of my portfolio companies does that. So like, you know, I think that there's so many different use cases for interesting agents, but I thought this scientific use case was pretty interesting.
Great. I'm probably going to answer from a user perspective. So one application I can no longer live without is OpenAI's deep research. Can we get a show of hands of how many people use deep research on a daily basis? Yeah, it's actually one of the, I think, the most ROI subscription plan I have. And so deep research is basically, let's say you ask a question, I want to get to know all the models, best models released in the past quarter. Do a research for me, what are their strengths and weakness, and they will do it for you within like 5 to 15 minutes of research. And it's a fine-tuned RL-trained version of OpenAI's O3, their most capable model. And by training this model end-to-end using reinforcement learning, the model actually gained the capability to plan for a long horizon search strategy, which is something that maybe a lot of us thought wouldn't be possible for agents to do very long horizon tasks very accurately. So I think definitely we're going to see more and more RL-trained agents coming this year, and then they are able to work on those multi-step tasks.
I want to piggyback on the lab example. I think that's really interesting just because lately on my podcast, there's a guest that's building an AI agent that manage other AI agents. So I want to hear your perspective on like where and when will we see AI agents that are managing other AI agents in a mainstream way?
Go. I jumped in, actually. I feel like there are a lot more people that are better positioned to answer this question than me in the panel or maybe in the audience. But I was chatting with someone yesterday about MCP and how the MCP server could also be a client on its own. And then if you think about it that way, you can actually have an MCP server run as an agent. And going back to my same like exponential thinking, which is becoming a trend on this panel now. But imagine that you can have a fleet of MCP agents managed by an MCP agent in the background, and you as a user don't even know that this is happening, but the kind of exponential productivity you can gain and the ease by which that orchestration works is like mind-blowing. We're not there yet, I think. If we are, let me know.
Or who's working on it.
Who's working on it? Yeah.
There
okay.
we go.
All right, we'll talk about it later. But I think that's a really cool way of thinking about how we're going to use the multi-agent architecture to just do things better and faster and easier.
I'm happy to. I think that I think the use of, I would say like when I think of agents, I always think of, and this is maybe to the point that James made earlier on like thinking about labor, like where are agents kind of taking over human intensive jobs or just like human work in general. And I think a lot about like A+ work, and humans should be focused on A+ work, and everyone should be spending their time on sort of like, what is the highest ROI output, or they should be, is maybe the key critical point there. But anything sort of like sub A- work is things where I'm like, there should absolutely be, repetitive workflows, or even like workflows that do change, but there is someone who's tracking or watching that kind of is able to give you a deterministic output that was looking similar to kind of the output you expected. Now, I don't think that I think there is a world we get there where there's like a lot of agents managing agents. I don't know if people saw this company, I think they're called Hey Lady Boss. I forget.
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, she just announced that like she's stepping down as CEO and an agent is taking over as CEO of her company, which I thought was like an interesting marketing campaign. But it was interesting to me that people kind of haven't that this was something that she thought either was gimmicky or something that was like she very much felt like there were parts of her job to be outsourced. Frankly, I think like CEO work is like relatively A+ oriented work, and so that's my hope is that every CEO continues to be in their roles, as we have some founders on this panel. But yeah, I think a lot about like kind of distinction between between like quality of work, and I think to your question, I'd say we're not far away, but also I think we'll always have humans to kind of be prioritizing and focusing on some of the what I'd call like higher emotional intelligence or like decision, some level of theoretical decision-making work. Though maybe AGI is around the corner, so who knows?
I think one classic example I can think of multi-agent architecture is in software engineering. So I think one of the first companies to apply this concept is Factory AI, backed by Sequoia, also coming out of AGI House community. They have many droids of different personality and specialty. So droids that can do database migration very well, or resolve technical debt very well, or can do project planning very well. And then they have a multi-agent architecture that can orchestrate these agents that have very good specialization in their own area, and they have seen much better performance on Sweetbench, which is right now the hardest software engineering benchmark on the market. So I think that's one classic use case for multi-agent architecture. Yeah.
I think from our experience, I think we break down the agent architecture into multi-agent, and kind of like microservices, you can like essentially break down the problem into like sub-problems. So for example, if a customer calling, they have issues, maybe they're looking for a refund or looking for like, upgrade. There are many different issues, and you want to really modularize and sort of break down those into like sub-problems. And the benefit of that is that you can actually individually build and evaluate each sort of agent for each problem separately, and you can report the performance on that so that you can, when something goes wrong, you can debug the, component versus like, having like a monolithic architecture that is hard to debug.
And I think that's like one of the biggest things that has happened since I started paying attention to this, which was like 2.5 years ago. We started off thinking very like monolithic. There was a company called Adept that people piled like hundreds of millions of dollars into, and the idea was there's going to be a singular vendor or a singular model that people either build or that build around. And then we saw a huge fragmentation in terms of smaller models and orchestration layers and agents, even from a model to tool calling to observability, all those components of the tech stack are being fragmented. And I think that's interesting for me personally, from my vantage point as an early stage investor, because it creates more room for additional players to come in, right? If you have a singular OpenAI or a Gemini or an Adept that comes over and creates that end-to-end workflow, what am I going to invest in? So I'm happy with this outcome. We'll see if it, kind of holds. But I think there's room for specialized expert, companies and models to play a role in a more fragmented ecosystem going forward.
I'd say you mentioned that we led this Series A in Writer, and it sounds like you guys are invested in that company too. Where for Writer, as an example, like they started primarily focused on generative content creation, specifically writing, and like anywhere there's content, turns out there's content in every part of a company, from customer support to dealing with marketing to dealing with any sales interaction, any email in itself. And now they have sort of created their application. They almost have like an app. I mean, they do have an app builder that sits basically on top of their models that anybody can go in and be like, hey, I have this like smaller workflow that as a customer support rep for her, as an example, I need to deal with like Japanese customers that are dealing with this specific problem. So I can kind of create this little agentic flow. And like, I almost think like empowering, the thing that I love about what Writer does is it sort of like breaks down the technicality for a lot of different people who are non-technical to actually have these sub workflows that they can manage and control, which I think is partially kind of the wave we're moving towards. Is like, it doesn't have to be, I mean, there's some incredible technical use cases, but there's a ton of non-technical use cases and non-technical users who are able to build, which I think will be a very interesting proliferation of the many little applications.
Oh, yeah, okay, I wasn't sure if we're all answering all. I guess on this one, kind of, I think one of the key things, as well as like agents managing agents, like we just have to get the actual like singular agents managing like a single use case working first, right? And there's a whole lot of work to do on that side, like in the enterprise, for instance, like authentication and permissioning and access to data, like there's a lot of interesting problems to solve there. Or like, I spend time in financial services, and if you think at the limit agents are going to be doing everything, then maybe there's going to be like, agent payment solutions to build and agent insurance and all these sorts of things. So I just think there's like a few steps towards like, or you can manage agents with agents today, but you have to have the actual like work.
On my end, I think that there probably won't be that many like UIs or workflow tools or like agentic interfaces that a single person's using at a company. Like someone in a marketing team or an advertising team or a support team will probably just have like one or two go-to interfaces. And I think the most successful companies in AI right now are just focused on solving like a really big problem for a certain persona, whether it's service or whatever it is, versus like trying to build some more horizontal app, which may end up just being an opportunity for like ChatGPT or whatever.
Actually, I'm going to jump in on that. I fully agree with this. And I'd say writer's the exception, not the rule necessarily in terms of being able to upsell those modules. But I think an interesting way of thinking is leveraging sort of a horizontal perspective and building modules individually for the customers, like specialized workflows, like building the last mile for the HR versus procurement, but ultimately using a same knowledge graph, same architecture at the bottom. Makes it easier, by the way, from a CISO conversation, from a CFO conversation to, you go into the client, you're actually implementing something. If they see value, then you can upsell some of the modules better. In an environment where we have no clue what the net revenue retention is going to be for any of these apps, especially like AI SDR is well discussed as one that has pretty abysmal retention. I think that's an interesting way of trying to build yourself into the ecosystem one by one by upselling apps. And I think it's like building a new Rippling or ServiceNow, but just like doing it one by creating more custom modules for each persona. I think that's something I'm pretty interested in.
Are you saying that's basically what Writer is doing?
No.
No,
A little bit.
But they have like a little bit more of a sub-focus. But I actually don't know if you're disagreeing. I actually don't. I think you might be on.
Oh, same page. I'm just trying to understand.
Exactly. Yeah. I am curious though, to your point on like you think there will be one sort of UI experience. Sorry, Grace, I'm just like hijacking.
Go for it.
But I'm curious on like that there will be maybe one or two UI experiences that people are interacting with. It kind of leads me to this question of like just. We are in Silicon Valley, and like we talk about this, like, we talk about AI basically all day, all the time, and you guys are selling to businesses that have AI budgets and whatnot. But like, I keep coming back to this question of like, how much actual usage is happening in these organizations of the products and software that's being built. And we talk about this all the time with Writer and like other such companies that we're investors in. Is just like, when you think about budget and you think about spend, and then you think about churn. To the point on net revenue retention, like I'd love to get, there are founders on this panel too, but just like a better idea of like, how do you, like, are you getting a better sense of usage? Are you actually seeing this like higher level of engagement across the board and people understanding? Or like, how much education is it that like, AI is not replacing jobs, like people should be using these workflows, like this is so much more assistive? Like, I'm curious about your marketing use case, and obviously Hightouch is an incredibly successful company and doing really well, but you're selling into non-tech industries, right? You're selling to sports teams and big
retail,
brands,
traditional
PetSmart,
industries.
like I'm curious how PetSmart is engaging and like where you're seeing usage really, and who from.
Yeah, so
You don't have to talk specifically about customers if you
Sure.
can't.
So I think generally what we're seeing is that, at least so far, the tools are being adopted by like more sophisticated users in these marketing teams versus like everyone on the team is adopting it. And then for the most part, I know there's all these stats online about what percentage of marketing teams are using AI and stuff like that. I do wonder about like the validity of those statistics, because from what I see in the industry, like outside of just brainstorming with ChatGPT or using it as like a Google alternative, I don't really see that much adoption of AI tools in the average marketing teams that we're talking to. And I'm speaking about like Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 type companies. I think the solutions that we're seeing successful in these companies are basically being adopted by like a subset of people on very specific use cases, and more sophisticated users predominantly. Versus like every single content marketer is using AI in their workflow. It's more like a director or like a manager of content marketing is like using this tool alongside their team, or for some use cases where they don't need to pass it to the team.
Are they also your advocate? Like, are they kind of like the AI advocate or the AI champion internally?
Typically, yeah, the more sophisticated, like more curious user tends to be like a little bit closer to the leader in these organizations.
Sure.
That might predict like a trend in the future
Yeah.
about which people are hired in these teams too. But yeah, that's what I find. It's actually pretty hard for us to get the like IC and these large enterprise companies like on super excited about AI solutions right now.
Yeah, when Writer started selling, when they sold first to Salesforce, Salesforce literally created this role that I think that we've looked at the job spec for, which is like the AI advocate role, and like it's an AI champion where like Salesforce has these folks who are kind of like experimenting, adopting, but it's not necessarily within it's not just in marketing. They're like, hey, we're sitting across, we're testing out products. Now, ideally, you want to actually sell it into a department. So we're hoping that that person is like championing it into a department. But that's kind of like a similar thing is like there are these power users and they're sort of advocating beyond just to get more adoption across the organization.
Yeah, actually what I'm seeing is a trend where like director level people or even VPs that previously didn't care about what was the process to deploy a new marketing campaign are now like super interested in that and like wanting to check out the SaaS tools in that space directly and like understand the workflow and even use these tools directly.
Is there a disintermediation of the labor force? Because
in some ways, yeah.
Right? Because like they're the people that are giving assignments to people to execute. So if you can do
and
it with
and now they're just trying to use these tools directly to some extent. Yeah, we're not seeing like mass adoption across the organization of these AI tools. We're more seeing like leaders in organizations. Again, these are enterprise organizations where people have like one specific job, start using these tools and then kind of push their teams to adopt it.
Totally. Since we talk about how other people pushing AI tools within their company, why don't we talk about as builders, especially some of these are panel today, what are the AI tools that you are using in your day-to-day work?
Well, we know you're using deep research.
Yeah. I think another really hot topic right now is MCP. I think every speaker now is like trying to get MCP into their talk. I think one thing that's missing for maybe a lot of the AI agent builders is the agentic payment layer for MCP. Because right now, if you want to use some MCP that requires payment, you need to set up all the token yourself beforehand. But what if it's some MCP servers that you didn't know that you need, but actually requires in the process of completing some tasks? So I think if we can have the discovery layer and also the agentic payment layer for MCP servers, I think that will actually enable a lot more applications to be built and then do a lot more things in the future.
I am curious, actually, just like on a totally separate note, is like, how many people in the room who are builders are using Cursor? Yeah, I think like, I am curious on kind of just like the code generation side of things. Like every one of our portfolio companies that we talk to, you know, they're like, hey, you know, you talk to them and they're like, most of them are using Cursor today. I'd say, and then there's the conversation of like, if we're not using Cursor, like we should be using Cursor, and you go to any of these like meetups and people are like, well, you know, we should all be using this. And I'd say Cursor is definitely one that people are talking a ton about. I'd also say like, people have built their own, a friend runs a company called Relay that basically like allows you to build a bunch of workflows for yourself, and it's like the ability to like build a bunch of like agentic workflows. I actually use Relay a lot because I've just sort of like augmented a bunch of my daily workflow, which has like nothing to do with being a builder of a company, but more just being like a more efficient venture capitalist. But you know, just like building out like workflows that basically like automate all of my, or like collate all of my reading for the day, or like have a quick note of like kind of how I should be spending my day, like my top priorities, things like that. So I like using some of the like, I like maybe, how do I think about it? It's like the world building aspect of it. I like Relay allowing me to use that and kind of like configure exactly what I want out of certain workflows. That's been a product that I really like.
I'm not a builder, but I'm a maybe hourly active user of deep research. I build memos, so that helps.
Yeah. Deep research versus, I actually prefer Claude's output on memos.
I have lunch at Google's cafeteria. I am sticking to Google products. We get free, really good access to dog food stuff, so.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, no. Actually, there's going to be some interesting education-related stuff coming out on that soon, which I'm excited about. I also like VO2.
Yeah, it's coming out today. Just
Well, I don't have enough. I don't know.
But
I'm
he
not
knows.
I'm not making an announcement here.
had the news.
Okay.
Thank
I've
you.
been playing with it for a while. Yeah, not to brag.
Brag.
Cursor with Claude, and I like rebuilding like existing applications and websites, just like help me think like what would be defensible in a given space. And I use Granola as well a lot, which is AI note taking.
Oh my God, everyone, yeah. I don't think there's a single person who doesn't use Granola.
Yeah, I think a lot of the transcription tools are very small. I also use Plot. It's like a hardware device that you can carry with you. And yeah, I'll be thinking about like what are the things if you were to start a company from scratch, what are the tools you need? It seems like you can use ChatGPT for a lot of the PM, like design stuff. Now you can generate images, generate design, and you can have just like pass the design, put it in Cursor, just like generate like the code. And there's also like some like marketing tools that are useful. I've been trying out like say Icon and Arcad, so like bunch of like tools to generate ads and distribute videos. Those are like good ways to get your words out there.
I predominantly use ChatGPT and V0, like just to generate like mock-ups of things,
Yeah.
basically.
What
Have
are
you heard of
some?
Subframe?
Wait, keep
Have
going.
you heard of Subframe?
Is that the one that like edits your website automatically or
No,
something?
it's like generative UX.
No, I haven't tried it. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Subframe.
Since we also have a lot of investors on the panel, I want to ask you guys, what are something that you feel like people should be building, but you haven't really seen in the market yet, in the agent space? Founders can help brainstorm too.
I'm sure someone's building this, but actually I know a lot of people are building this, but I haven't found the one that I really want to back is thinking through, enterprise permissioning and security in a multi-agentic environment, just because I'm a very light user of the lovable bold type stuff, and I think the real future is actually doing the fully hosted consumer or enterprise versions that are business persona facing internally. And once we're able to do that, like retool is going to be dead completely. I think it's already slowed down. But then in order to supplement that, you need to have sort of a directory secrets management permissioning layer that goes on top. I don't know if that's an individual company. Is that like a Microsoft problem, or is that who's going to solve it? But I think that's going to be interesting, like Okta for web apps that we're building in the enterprise type use case.
I agree with that. And then I spend a lot of time in regulated industries and
Yeah.
financial services, so that layer is going to be super, super important. Or the vertical agents are actually going to solve in that space. I want to see like much more companies there, and I think they'll probably beat out the horizontals.
Guys, I'm personally surprised that we don't have like well-functioning AI data analyst type stuff as like an everyday primitive in business. Maybe I haven't seen people using it on like full-scale data warehouses and stuff like that. Julius, someone asked about.
There's a bunch of like natural language SQL type stuff that people.
Yeah, there is, but nothing seems like widely
And
adopted.
picked up and-
And like interactive interface from plots that are like charts that are coming out of it, et cetera.
I think on the auth side, it's like MCP, but way more easier to set up because today it's like focused on developers. But if you have like a way of authentication layer and authorization, you can have like user identity, and you can just like download them as apps in the enterprise.
I think there's like hundreds of consumer use cases that we still haven't figured out, that we like don't have agents for yet, that I think will be incredibly interesting. I know the last panel was on consumer. I think we can talk all about like a lot of the enterprise use cases, but like as like an early stage investor, like I think some of the outsized outcomes are in consumer, and I do think there's more to come. So always. I mostly do B2B, but always interested in like these really unique consumer use cases that aren't just utility, like Perplexity and ChatGPT, but some of the really fun use cases. Like Character is still a very, very interesting product that like did some like it has one of the most engaged young population community, Gen Z community, which like, and it kind of like blew up in the last 4 years, which was amazing.
I'm also very excited about the consumer opportunities. I think, for example, just yesterday, Google launched Project Extra capabilities into a Gemini Live app. So it's an AI assistant that can see what you see through camera and screen sharing and hear what you hear, and then really assist you with a lot of your day-to-day tasks. So I think we're going to see more and more that kind of truly smart AI assistant that doesn't require a very lengthy prompt to help you do things coming out this year.
On that note, let my agent talk to your agent. This panel is over. Thank you guys so much. Those are so many great takeaways. And I hope if you're building anything that they just mentioned, please reach out to them immediately after this panel.
Thanks, Grace.
Thanks, Chris.
Do a quick group photo, stay there. Good. Double check. Everyone, we'll transition to our 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 3. Continue to take pictures and stuff. But look at the iPhones.